How's it going, everyone? Vlad here and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a very important topic which is often asked about on many industrial automation and manufacturing communities, and that's going to be moving from electrician to engineer to senior engineer. So I've already made a video on control systems engineering and in a general sense what there is to be expected at the engineering side, but the question that often comes up is what are the differences? What are the skill sets? We're also going to talk about the different ways that the salaries are allocated. So if you're either struggling to find some of these individuals, or if you're yourself looking to make that transition or considering an offer to make that transition, or if you're hiring for these types of roles, this video is going to be very important. So without any further delay, I do want to give a quick disclaimer. This is based on my experience. Of course, that there's going to be a lot of variation depending on the different industries, depending on where you're doing this type of work. So if you're working at an integrator, at an OEM, or at an end user, which is a manufacturer. That being said, let's start with the electrician. So the electrician is primarily going to be responsible for making sure that the operations are running. And what that generally means is that electricians are going to be staffed in the maintenance or operations department to make sure that they troubleshoot any issues that come up with the production line. And so what that generally means as well is that they're going to have a much shorter foresight of manufacturing operations. That means that they're going to have work orders to work on today when there's no issues, but generally speaking, they're going to be working on shorter term projects. That's not to be said that there's not going to be very smart electricians that are able to program entire systems. There's multiple sites that I've been to where electricians know how to program servo drives and fairly advanced functions in the PLC domain, but in a very general sense, an electrician that is early in their career is going to be overseeing to make sure that everything is running, troubleshooting, and maybe making small corrections to your manufacturing line. To the same point, electricians are rarely going to be programmers. Electricians are usually going to work inside of panels, so electrical panels. They're going to be known for wiring systems or troubleshooting those systems, so tracing cables, reading drawings that have already been created by whichever teams, either internal or external, and they will be, like I said, troubleshooting within those panels on the electrical side. Obviously speaking, depending on how complex the control systems are, electricians will also be trained on PLCs and HMIs. However, I would argue that the knowledge that the electrician needs to troubleshoot a control system is going to be somewhat different than what you would see on the engineering side. PLC and HMI basics. And once again, before you start throwing stones, as I've mentioned, there's going to be electricians that have very advanced knowledge of those systems, depending on the environment, depending on the opportunities that are presented in front of them. So that is not to say that an electrician cannot have those advanced skills. On the engineering side, the skill set is quite a bit different, right? So a lot of times engineers will come in from engineering schools, whether they're accredited or not. That is a whole different conversation, but they will have a lot of what's called theoretical knowledge. And that theoretical knowledge allows them to, for the majority of their work, design systems that will be deployed on the manufacturing floor. So immediately we see a difference in skill sets, and that's not to say that one is better than the other. That is to say that there is a need for designing the systems and running projects associated with making sure that those systems get deployed on the plant floor, and there's a different skill set to make sure that those systems actually perform to their required capacity on the plant floor. So that is one of the biggest nuances when it comes to engineering versus electricians or technicians at the plant level. So design, and I put that in quotes because a lot of times in the industrial setting, depending on, again, who you work for, if you're working for an end user that is not necessarily expanding their operations, you could be very much an engineer that's also doing the troubleshooting work, that's also doing the support for the line system, that is more of an operational engineering type of role than a design or more corporate type of role. So there's going to be a lot of different nuance, and so you need to be asking those questions as you're maybe interviewing interviewing or as you're looking into some of those roles. If you're working for a systems integrator, the answer is going to be clear. If you're engineering systems for other customers, the chances are you're only going to be doing design and commissioning for those specific customers. And so this is where the second item comes in. As I mentioned, commissioning. Commissioning is basically, and there's going to be different labels. You can call it commissioning, you can call it FAT, VAT, SAT, so it's site acceptance test, vendor acceptance test, or factory acceptance test. Basically, engineers are going to do a lot of different checks and validations and setup of those systems that they've either designed or contributed to in conversations, so that the systems are going to be basically delivering the value they're supposed to the plant floor. When it comes to electricians, they're going to obviously help on making sure that the electrical circuits are operating properly. They're going to do the runs from your mains or your MCC buckets to that specific machine or line, but they're not going to be responsible or own the fact that the system delivers something operationally to the plant teams. So immediately there's a component project ownership. In general, electricians are going to get work orders either from the operations team or the maintenance team, and those work orders can range from we need to perform maintenance on a specific set of valves or a specific set of motors. It could be resetting the leads, it could be re-terminating something because it's been intermittently failing. Generally speaking, when it comes to project ownership, engineers are going to be expected to lead longer term initiatives. And those initiatives can be a couple of months to 6 months to several years. So I've been on projects where we had to modernize entire plants or facilities, and you would have to create a plan for 2 years long. We're going to decommission this specific line, move some of the equipment to another line, and we're going to figure out how to utilize some of those resources as we move forward. So there is a component of understanding how to run projects, and there is a component also of, to some extent, understanding financials. Early career engineers and someone who has not studied financials but has been a little bit more technical may not wired to understand the financials of a project, but as you grow in your career, and this is a conversation we'll have about a senior engineer, you're basically expected to do a couple of additional things. Number one is you need to understand how the budgets are allocated to those different projects. You need to understand how to prioritize certain initiatives, because ultimately you don't have one single project running at a time, you have multiple running in parallel. And you also need to understand how to work with external stakeholders that will be either negotiating pricing or having conversations with you about different resources that will be on site. So that is a project ownership expectation of an engineer that is usually not there for the electrician. I did want to mention the point of a salary and expectations when it comes to the actual job of an electrician and engineer. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, electricians will have an hourly rate associated with what they're doing. This is not always the case. I've seen salaried electricians and I've seen hourly engineers. Again, it really depends on what you're doing, but in a very general sense, electricians are going to be hourly. And this offers a couple of benefits, right? And so for those of you who have not been in those roles, immediately understand that this comes at a very interesting price or opportunity depending how you look at it. So if you're a hourly electrician, you will generally have some opportunity of overtime that is going to be paid at a 1.5 or usually double rate. And sometimes I've seen triple rates on certain holidays, because you're going to be doing work that is absolutely required by the facility. When it comes to engineering and salaried position, you're obviously going to have a chunk of salary allocated to you on a yearly basis that will be paid to you at a bi-weekly or a monthly basis, but ultimately you will usually be working more hours than what is on your contract. So I also want you to be cognizant if, for example, you're getting, I don't know, $60 per hour and you're looking to transition into a 120K per year type of role, you need to understand what kind of benefits and advantages you're maybe giving up or gaining by making that transition. And it is not as clear cut as one may think, because obviously sometimes you will have different pay structures. You will have salary matching on your 401k. You maybe will have different benefits. You maybe will have some allocation towards your PPE and other purchases. But ultimately, if you're making a lot in overtime as an hourly employee and you're going to be transitioning into a salaried role that may require you to work more hours than you're expecting, a lot of times you will not be getting a bonus on the overtime work, but you might have a bonus to your salary depending on your performance. So regardless, if you have any questions on that side, don't hesitate to reach out. I've been in many of those conversations as well as negotiations, so always happy to help. Let's now move on to senior engineers. Underlined and explained this a little bit when it comes to project ownership and financials, but a very important distinction between an engineer and a senior engineer is that at the engineering or early level career, you are expected to basically be given a task that you will then accomplish and then ask for more work from your manager or maybe senior engineer or someone who has been at the plant for longer than you have. As a senior engineer, the expectation is going to shift a little bit on you. So as a senior engineer, you should know the system or the control system, the environment, a lot better than in your early career. Thus, you should be the one that is basically identifying opportunities of improvement of specific systems, and you're basically making the ask for a budget from your senior management team. So what does that mean in detail? Like I said, if you're an engineer, you're going to be given projects. You're going to be told, we're looking to modernize the system, and then you 6 months, maybe to a year, to do some design, to work with an external group. You're going to commission that system, and then you're going to move on to a different project. As a senior engineer, not only you're executing projects, but you're also looking for opportunities, which means that you're researching how to, for example, eliminate bottlenecks. Not just by asking for, hey, I would like to get some capital to eliminate the bottleneck on this specific line. You would have to create what's called a business case. So you will say, currently we have maybe this very old control system, the machine is running slow, everything is obsolete, so we're going to need, for example, $60,000 to replace this PLC, this HMI system. We can then put this on the network, allow for remote connectivity, which will then improve our OE for this machine by 5%, thus reducing the cost that we need by $100,000. Therefore, the payback is extremely good when it comes to this investment. So you're going to pitch this idea to your management team. So I'm going to just write that as management team, because you are expected again to interact at those levels a lot more. You're also expected to utilize data and information synthesized by your plant to create different presentations and understand how to basically make the facility better on the operations side. So that's going to be the main difference for a senior engineer when it comes to expectations. Of course, at that point in time, you may also be managing or leading a team of a couple engineers that not necessarily going to be under you, but they're going to be indirectly learning and be mentored by you. So it is also something to be expected to have better communication skills, better presentation skills, and be able to coach others to be excited about the profession. So if you have any questions about the electrician, the engineer, or the senior engineer position, don't hesitate to reach out. Either leave a comment or get in touch with me on LinkedIn or through the Joltech website. Happy to help you on either front if you're looking into these positions, if you're hiring for these positions, or if you're struggling to find people as a manufacturer for some of those positions. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.